The massive crystal chamber floated silently in the darkness between stars, its walls carved from a single asteroid that had been hollowed out thousands of years ago. Inside, beings from 47 different worlds sat in their assigned seats, each one representing a species that had mastered space travel long before humans had learned to make fire. Ambassador Kethmer stood at the center podium, his four muscular arms gripping the speaking platform. His species, the hegemony, had ruled large parts of the galaxy for over 10,000 years. Today, his usual calm was gone. Fear showed in his multiple eyes as he looked around the chamber. "The sensors do not lie," he said, his voice carrying. To every corner through the translation machines, the void swarm is moving again. After sleeping in the dark spaces for countless ages, they wake, they hunger. A wave of worried sounds filled the chamber. The void swarm was not just an enemy, they were a nightmare from the oldest stories. Creatures made of living darkness that ate everything they touched. Planets, stars, entire civilizations had vanished when they last appeared. Then, without warning, they had disappeared into the empty spaces between galaxies. "How many?" asked Commander Veltara, her crystal body glowing with nervous energy. Her people, the ethereal collective, were beings of pure energy contained in crystal shells. They had fought the swarm before, long ago. "Our deep space watchers count at least 1,000,000 entities," Kethmer replied. "But they grow stronger with each world they consume. Each ship they destroy becomes part of their mass." In the smallest section of the chamber, far from the important seats, Ambassador Li Hian sat quietly. He was human, and his people had only been part of the Galactic Council for 3 years. Most of the other species still thought of humans as children playing with toys. They did not understand. Li Hian was a small man with graying hair and simple clothes. He did not wear the fancy biosuits or energy fields that other ambassadors used. His translator was a basic model that sometimes made strange sounds. To the other species, he looked exactly like what they expected from a primitive world. "Each member species must send their military forces," Kethmer continued. "The Zephyrians will bring their crystal fleets that can bend light itself. The Construct Alliance will deploy their geometric ships that fold space. The Hive Mind will send their biomechanical swarms that think as one." He paused and looked directly at the human section. His expression showed what he really thought about Earth's chances. "And the humans, .. he said slowly, "will contribute what they can manage." Several species made sounds that might have been laughter. The Trilaxians, who looked like giant insects, clicked their mandibles in amusement. The synthetic overlords, machines that had replaced their organic creators, made electronic buzzing noises that their translators called mild entertainment. Li Hyun stood up slowly. He was not tall, and his simple military uniform looked plain next to the advanced technology around him. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. "The Terran Defense Force will send our first fleet," he said. "Earth stands ready to do its part." "How sweet," whispered Veltara to the ambassador next to her. "The little humans want to play war with their metal ships." Commander Zothal of the Draconic Empire leaned back in his seat. His species looked like giant lizards with technology grafted into their scales. "Perhaps they could handle supply runs," he suggested with a low growl. "Bring food and spare parts to the real fighters. Their ships still use chemical rockets," added Centaurk Prime, a mechanical being whose body was a collection of geometric shapes. "We mastered gravity control when their world was still covered in ice." Li Hyun heard every comment, but his face did not change. He had expected this reaction. Earth's technology was simple compared to species that had ruled space for millennia. Human ships were metal boxes with fusion engines. Human weapons fired simple projectiles or used chemical explosives. Compared to energy weapons that could destroy moons or shields that bent reality itself, human technology looked like stone tools. "The Council accepts Earth's contribution," Kethmer said formally, though his tone suggested he expected very little. "All fleets will gather at the staging area above. Kepler 4, for 2B. We have perhaps one standard month before the swarm reaches inhabited systems." As the session ended and the various ambassadors began to leave, Li Hyun remained seated. He watched as beings of incredible power and technology discussed strategies that involved reshaping planets and creating artificial black holes. Their confidence was absolute. They had faced the swarm before and survived. They would do so again. But Li Hyun knew something they did not. He had studied the old records carefully. The few that survived from the last time the swarm had appeared. Every species that had tried to fight them with advanced technology had failed. The swarm learned too quickly, adapted too fast. They turned strength into weakness and weapons into tools for their own use. That as he finally stood to leave, Li Hyun allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes, he thought, the most advanced civilizations had the most to learn from those they called primitive. The galaxy was about to discover that humans had not survived on a hostile world by being the strongest or the smartest. They had survived by being the most stubborn. The staging ground above planet Kepler 4, for 2B, was a sight that would have made ancient humans fall to their knees in worship. Massive metal platforms stretched across space for hundreds of kilometers. each one bigger than Earth's largest cities. They had been built by the Construct Alliance, using technology that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Admiral Park Jinwoo stood on the bridge of his flagship, the TDF Seoul, looking out through the thick glass windows at the alien fleets. Gathering around them, he was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen many battles. His simple blue uniform looked plain compared to the exotic technology surrounding his ship. The alien vessels were beyond anything humans had ever imagined. The Zephyrian ships looked like they were made of living crystal, their surfaces shifting through colors that had no names. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, powered by energy sources that could make stars burn brighter or go dark with a thought. The Ethereal Collective had brought ships that were not really ships at all, but contained energy beings that could exist in the vacuum of space. They looked like dancing lights wrapped in crystal shells, moving in patterns that hurt to watch for too long. The Construct Alliance deployed geometric vessels that seemed to fold space around themselves. Their ships were perfect mathematical shapes, cubes, spheres, and forms that existed in more dimensions than human minds could understand. They moved without engines, simply deciding to be in a different place and appearing there. The hive mind's biomechanical fleet was perhaps the most disturbing. Their ships were alive, grown rather than built, with organic hulls that breathed and pulsed with their own heartbeat. Thousands of smaller fighter craft swarmed around the larger vessels, like insects around a nest. In the middle of all this incredible technology sat the human fleet. 50 ships of different sizes, their gray metal hulls marked with scratches and burns from countless battles. They looked like crude metal boxes compared to the elegant curves and impossible shapes around them. Captain Kim Sora joined Admiral Park at the viewing window. She was younger than him, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded her own ship for 5 years and had never lost a battle, though she had come close several times. "They are not impressed with us," she said, quietly, watching as alien ships moved in perfect formations around the staging area. "Look at how they position themselves. They give us the smallest section, the one farthest from the command center." Park nodded. Each alien species had claimed large areas of space around the platforms. Their ships filled the void in displays of power and technology. The human fleet looked tiny in comparison, crowded into a corner like unwanted guests at a party. Sir called Communications Officer Yoon Dae-yoon from his station. He was a young man who had volunteered for this mission even though everyone said it was likely to be his last. "We are receiving a transmission from the Hegemony Command vessel." The main screen flickered to life, showing Commander Vorthak of the Hegemony Fleet. He was a creature that looked like a shark crossed with a giant insect, his body covered in biomechanical parts that enhanced his natural abilities. Scars covered his face from battles fought across the galaxy. "Humans," he said, his voice filled with the kind of patience adults used when talking to children. "Your ships appear to be having difficulty maintaining formation. Perhaps your people would be better suited to supply duties. Medical support. Perhaps leave the actual fighting to species with real experience." Park's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Thank you for your concern, Commander. The Terran Defense Force will handle our assigned patrol sectors." "Your assigned sectors," Vorthak repeated, and other alien commanders could be heard, making amused sounds in the background. "Yes, well, try not to get in the way when the real fighting starts." The transmission ended, leaving the human bridge in silence. Several officers clenched their fists, but Park raised his hand for calm. "They have no idea what they are dealing with," Captain Kim said quietly. "Not the swarm, and not us." "No," Park agreed. "They see our ships and think we are weak because we do not have their fancy technology. They think simple means primitive." Through the windows, they could see alien crews moving with perfect precision. The Zephyrians moved like dancers, their crystal bodies glowing with inner light. The Construct Alliance beings worked in mathematical perfection, each action calculated to the smallest detail. The hive mind moved as one organism, thousands of individuals sharing a single purpose. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Cho Mingi from the tactical station. She was the youngest officer on the bridge, barely 25 years old, but she had the best tactical mind Park had ever seen. "Long-range sensors are picking up movement in the outer system. Something big is coming." Park turned from the window and walked to his command chair. Around him, his crew prepared for what was coming. They had simple weapons, basic armor, and ships that looked like scrap metal compared to the alien fleets. But they had something else, something the aliens did not understand. They had learned to fight on a world where everything wanted to kill them. They had survived ice ages and wars and disasters that would have destroyed other species. They had made it to the stars not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they never gave up. "All ships, battle stations," Park ordered. "Show them what humans can do." The attack began without any warning at all. One moment, the outer edge of the star system was empty and quiet. The next moment, space itself seemed to tear open like paper, and darkness poured through the holes. The void swarm came like a black tide. They were not ships in any sense that living beings could understand. They were creatures made of dark matter and hunger, shapeless masses that ate light itself. Some were as small as fighters, others as large as battlecruisers. They moved with purpose, flowing through space like oil through water. Lieutenant Gen. Siakman was on duty at the long-range sensor station when his screens suddenly filled with contacts. He was a quiet young man who had joined the Space Force to see the galaxy. Now he wished he had stayed home. "Contact," he called out, his voice cracking slightly. Multiple contacts at the system edge. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. The Zephyrian Crystal Fleet was positioned at the outer defense line. Their ships were the most advanced in the galaxy, powered by energy sources that could remake matter at will. Commander Talsith had fought in a dozen wars and had never lost a battle. "All units engage at maximum range," he broadcast to his fleet. "Show these ancient nightmares what modern warfare looks like." The Zephyrian weapons were beautiful and terrible. Beams of pure energy lanced out across space, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a small moon. The beams struck the leading swarm entities and tore them apart in explosions of light and force. For a moment, it seemed like the battle would be easy. The swarm creatures fell back, their dark forms disrupted by the energy weapons. Cheers echoed across the communication channels as other alien fleets watched the Zephyrians drive back the ancient enemy. But then something impossible happened. The swarm entities that had been destroyed began to reform. The energy that had torn them apart was absorbed and used to make them stronger. Within minutes, the same creatures that had been scattered were back, but now they were glowing with absorbed Zephyrian energy. "Modify frequency to Delta 7, Commander Talsith ordered, his voice starting to show worry. "They are adapting to our weapons." Switch to his words were cut off as the swarm entities turned the absorbed energy back on the Zephyrian fleet. Crystal ships that had taken centuries to grow were destroyed in seconds by their own weapons, reflected back at them with deadly precision. "All units, retreat to secondary positions," Talsith broadcast desperately. "They are learning our weapons faster than we can change them." But it was too late. The swarm flowed over the Zephyrian fleet like a wave, consuming ships and converting their energy into more of their own kind. Commander Talsith's flagship, a beautiful crystal cathedral that had been the pride of his people, dissolved like sugar in acid. The Construct Alliance moved to engage next. Their geometric ships used weapons that folded space itself, creating gravity wells that could crush planets. Surely, they thought, basic physics could not be adapted or absorbed. They were wrong. The swarm entities flowed around the gravity wells, using them as slingshots to increase their speed. When the Alliance tried to create black holes to trap the enemy, the swarm creatures simply merged with the dark matter and became stronger. "Impossible," transmitted Sintark Prime, the leader of the Alliance fleet. "They are using our own weapons against us. How can they adapt so quickly?" The hive mind biomechanical swarms tried next. Their living ships fired weapons made of controlled viruses and bioacids. For a few minutes, it seemed to work. The swarm entities writhed as the biological weapons ate at their dark matter forms. But then the swarm began to adapt again. They absorbed the bioweapons and turned them into tools for their own use. Worse, they began to consume the hive mind ships themselves, converting the living metal into more swarm entities. The sight of friendly ships being digested alive and turned against their former allies filled the remaining crews with horror. In the command center of the main staging platform, panic spread like wildfire. Species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years watched their most advanced fleets crumble against an enemy that seemed to learn from every attack. "We need to retreat," gasped Veltara, her crystal form flickering with fear. "Pull back. To the inner system. Find a new strategy." "There is no strategy," Commander Vorthak snarled, his biomechanical enhancements sparking with stress. "They adapt to everything we throw at them. Every weapon we use makes them stronger." Admiral Park had been watching the battle from the bridge of the TDF Sol. His officers looked at him with questions in their eyes. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were being destroyed by an enemy that turned their own technology against them. Admiral Captain Kim said quietly, "They are requesting permission for all remaining fleets to retreat." Park looked out at the approaching darkness. The swarm was growing larger with each ship it consumed. Soon, it would reach the inner system where billions of lives hung in the balance. "No," he said firmly. "Signal all human ships. We are moving to engage." The bridge fell silent. Communications Officer Yoon stared at his admiral as if he had gone insane. "Sir," he said carefully, "if the alien fleets cannot stop them, how can we?" Park allowed himself a small smile. "Because we are not going to try to outthink them, Lieutenant. We are going to do something they have never seen before." "What is that, sir?" "We are going to be human." The human fleet moved forward like a pack of hunting wolves. Their ships were simple metal boxes compared to the elegant alien vessels. But they moved with a purpose that surprised the watching commanders. Admiral Park's voice was calm as he gave orders that made no sense to the advanced civilizations. Listening in, All ships, load kinetic rounds. Park commanded, nuclear warheads to maximum yield. Prepare for close engagement. The alien observers could not believe what they were hearing. Kinetic rounds were just chunks of metal fired at high speed. Nuclear weapons were crude explosives that primitive species used before they learned to harness pure energy, against an enemy that had just absorbed and reflected the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. The humans were bringing Stone Age tools to a modern war. Are they insane? Transmitted Commander Vorthak from his damaged command ship. They are going to get themselves killed in the first minute. The TDF Soul led the charge, its railguns spinning up to firing speed. Railguns were simple weapons. They used magnetic fields to throw tungsten slugs at incredible velocity. No exotic energy, no complex technology, just basic physics turned into a weapon. Lieutenant Cho Minji sat in her fighter cockpit, watching the swarm entities approach. She was young and had never been in a real battle before, but her hands were steady on the controls. Her fighter was a simple machine, fusion engine, basic armor, and missiles that used chemical explosives. All fighters, attack pattern random. She heard Captain Kim broadcast. Do not follow standard formations. Be unpredictable. The first human attack was nothing like what the galaxy had seen before, where alien fleets moved in perfect formations. The human ships scattered in all directions. Like startled birds, their weapons fired without any pattern the swarm could recognize. The railgun slugs hit the first swarm entities like hammers. The simple tungsten projectiles punched through the dark matter forms without carrying any energy that could be absorbed. The swarm creatures tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to, just raw kinetic force that turned their molecular structure into scattered atoms. Nuclear strike, pattern 7. Admiral Park ordered calmly. The nuclear warheads detonated in brilliant flashes of light and heat. The explosions were crude compared to alien energy weapons, but they worked in a way the swarm had never encountered. Instead of directed energy that could be absorbed and redirected, the nukes simply created expanding spheres of destruction that vaporized everything in their path. The swarm entities found themselves facing something they could not counter. How do you adapt to a chunk of metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed? How do you absorb and redirect a nuclear explosion that turns matter into pure plasma? But it was not just the weapons that shocked the watching aliens. It was how the humans fought. Lieutenant Cho dove her fighter through a formation of swarm entities, using their own gravity to slingshot herself into an attack position. Her maneuver violated every rule of space combat, but it worked. She fired her missiles at point-blank range, using the explosions to throw herself toward her next target. Impossible, whispered Velterra as she watched the human pilot perform maneuvers that should have killed her. She is using the enemy's mass against them. How did she calculate those vectors so quickly? She did not calculate, observed Sin. Prime was something like wonder in his mechanical voice. She is flying by instinct. Pure organic intuition. Marine Commander Bang Sungyan led boarding parties onto partially consumed alien vessels, fighting hand-to-hand where other species would never dare to go. His soldiers carried simple kinetic weapons and explosive charges, tools that seemed primitive but proved devastatingly effective in close quarters. The swarm entities had adapted to energy weapons and exotic technology, but they had no answer. For a human soldier with a rifle who refused to follow any tactical manual, Bang's Marines moved through the ship corridors like flowing water, adapting their tactics from moment to moment based on what they encountered. They are not following any doctrine I recognize, Commander Vorthak transmitted, his voice filled with bewilderment as he watched human forces engage the enemy. Their movements are random, chaotic. There is no pattern to predict. That is exactly the point, Captain Kim replied as she watched her tactical display. Human ships were scattered across the battlefield, each one fighting its own small war. You cannot counter what you cannot understand. The tide of battle began to change. The swarm entities, so successful at adapting to alien technology, found themselves confused by human tactics that seemed to change every few seconds. Sergeant Major O'Gideon's demolition teams used conventional explosives to create debris fields that slowed swarm movement. Pilot Han Wujian's squadron performed ramming attacks that no sane species would attempt, using their ships as weapons when their missiles ran out. They fight like the universe itself is their enemy, Velterra observed, her crystal form pulsing with something that might have been awe. No plan, no coordination, just pure survival instinct. The swarm began to falter. For the first time since they had emerged from the dark spaces, they encountered an enemy they could not simply absorb and overcome. The human weapons were too simple to adapt to, the human tactics too chaotic to predict. Admiral Park watched from his bridge as the impossible happened. The Void Swarm, terror of the galaxy, began to retreat, not destroyed, but confused and unable to counter an enemy that fought like no other species they had ever encountered. So this is a human army, transmitted an unknown alien voice across the communication channels. They fight like mad. And Park smiled grimly. No, he said quietly, we fight like humans. The retreat of the Void Swarm was as sudden and shocking as their arrival had been. One moment they were pressing forward, consuming everything in their path. The next moment they were pulling back through the same dark rifts they had emerged from, leaving behind only the wreckage of what should have been their greatest victory. In the aftermath, rescue ships moved through the debris fields, searching for survivors from the alien fleets that had been destroyed in the first wave of attacks. The numbers were terrible. Thousands of advanced vessels lost, entire species battle fleets reduced to scattered fragments floating in space. But somehow, impossibly, the enemy had been turned back. Not destroyed completely, but forced to retreat by an enemy they could not understand or counter. Admiral Park stood in the great assembly hall of the staging platform, facing representatives from every species in the Galactic Council. The chamber was different now. Where before, there had been casual dismissal and barely concealed contempt for the human delegation. Now there was something else, respect mixed with a healthy dose of fear. Ambassador Lee Hyun sat in the front row, no longer relegated to the back corner, reserved for junior members. His simple clothes and basic translator seemed less primitive now, more like the practical tools of a people who valued function over form. Report, Admiral requested Kefmer, his forearms folded in a gesture that humans had learned meant serious attention. The hegemony commander's usual arrogance was gone, replaced by genuine curiosity and, perhaps, a touch of worry. Park looked around the chamber at faces and forms representing the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Beings who had mastered technologies that could reshape reality itself, who had ruled the stars for millennia, who had considered themselves the pinnacle of evolution and achievement. The Void Swarm operates on predictive algorithms, Park began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. They analyze attack patterns, study defensive strategies, and adapt their responses to counter whatever they encounter. Every advanced civilization they have faced has fallen to this approach. But you defeated them, interrupted Velterra, her crystal form flickering with nervous energy. How is that possible when our most sophisticated weapons failed? Park allowed himself a small smile. We did not try to defeat them with superior technology. We embraced what you call our weaknesses and turned them into strengths. Commander Vorthak leaned forward, his scarred face showing genuine confusion. Your weapons are primitive. Your tactics are chaotic. Your ships look like they were built in a scrapyard. How can any of that be an advantage? Captain Kim stepped forward to stand beside her. Admiral, her uniform was torn and stained from the battle, but her voice was steady and clear. That is exactly why it worked, she explained. The swarm expects sophisticated enemies with predictable patterns. They have fought civilizations that rely on energy weapons, advanced shields, and calculated strategies. They know how to counter all of that. But humans fight differently, added Lieutenant Cho Mingi, still wearing her flight suit. We use kinetic weapons because they are simple and reliable. We employ nuclear explosives because they work. We fight with chaotic tactics because we learn to survive on a world where everything wanted to kill us. The alien representatives exchanged glances that their translators could not interpret. The idea that primitive technology could be superior to advanced systems challenged everything they believed about progress and evolution. You were saying that your apparent technological inferiority was intentional, asked Sintarg Prime, his mechanical voice carrying disbelief. Not inferiority, Park corrected. Simplicity. When you build systems that depend on complex algorithms and exotic energy sources, you create vulnerabilities that can be exploited. When you fight with basic physics and unpredictable tactics, you become very difficult to counter. Marine Commander Bang Sungyan spoke up from the back of the chamber, his voice rough from breathing recycled air in damaged ships. The swarm could absorb your energy weapons and turn them against you. But they could not absorb a tungsten slug. Moving at 30% of light speed, they could redirect exotic particles. But they could not redirect a nuclear explosion that simply turned everything nearby into plasma. More importantly, added Sergeant Major Oh Jian, they could not predict what we would do next because we did not know ourselves. We adapted to each situation as it happened, using whatever worked in the moment. Ambassador Lee Hyun finally stood, and the chamber fell completely silent. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of a species that had clawed its way to the stars through pure, stubborn determination. The galaxy has spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare, he said quietly. You have created weapons that can destroy stars and defenses that can bend reality. But perhaps, in becoming so advanced, you forgot something important. What is that? Asked Kefmer. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. Sometimes, being unpredictable is better than being perfect. Sometimes surviving is more important than winning elegantly. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound, the deep rumbling that was the hegemony equivalent of applause. Soon, other species joined in with their own expressions of respect and acknowledgement. The Council recognizes announced formally that we have much to learn from our newest members. As the session ended and the various representatives began to file out, Velterra approached the human delegation. Her crystal form pulsed with what humans had learned was curiosity mixed with concern. "Your species frightens us," she admitted. "Not because you are primitive, but because you are something we do not understand. You are not advanced, but you are not primitive either. You are something else entirely." Admiral Park nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe that is exactly what the galaxy needs."